Have you ever wondered why China lends money to so many countries around the world? Is it a simple act of generosity, or is there a strategic motive behind it? These are the questions that often come to mind when we delve into the topic of China's debt trap policy. This policy, far from being a simple economic strategy, is a complex web of loans and debts that has significant ramifications on a global scale. Why is this relevant? Well, it impacts not only the countries that borrow from China but also the global economy, touching everyone from the biggest corporate conglomerates to the average consumer. This topic is far-reaching, brimming with intricate details and filled with potential implications that could reshape the world as we know it. Today, we will delve into this complex issue, starting from its inception to its current status, and speculate about its future implications. We'll examine the strategy behind China's lending, the countries ensnared in this debt trap, and the measures China undertakes when debts aren't paid. We'll also take a look at how this could affect India and the global economy. So, let's get started on this fascinating journey into the world of international finance.
Now, the Chinese policy in Africa is often described as a debt trap. Experts say it is a part of a deliberate strategy to loan unmanageable sums to African countries, draw them into China's sphere of influence, and force unfair commitments upon them.
The roots of China's debt trap policy can be traced back to the early 2000s. It was a time of significant change and economic growth for China. As the country started to experience a surge in its foreign exchange reserves, it began to look outward, seeking ways to wield its economic power. In the beginning, China's debt policy wasn't just about lending money. It was a comprehensive strategy aimed at expanding China's global influence. This was achieved through a combination of foreign aid, trade, and most notably, strategic lending to other countries. The first countries that came under this policy were primarily in Africa and Southeast Asia. Why did China choose to start lending money to other countries? There were several strategic reasons. One was to secure natural resources like oil, minerals, and timber for its rapidly growing economy. Another was to gain political influence and goodwill by helping developing countries build infrastructure and boost their economies. But there's another layer to this strategy that's often overlooked. By lending money to countries that often struggled to get loans from Western institutions, China positioned itself as an alternative global lender. This was a calculated move designed to increase China's global standing and counterbalance the influence of Western institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. The initial countries involved in China's debt policy included nations like Angola, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka. For instance, China lent Angola billions of dollars in the mid-2000s to rebuild its infrastructure after decades of civil war. In return, China secured a steady supply of oil to fuel its booming economy. As for Pakistan, China has invested heavily in the country as part of the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, a flagship project of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. And in Sri Lanka, Chinese loans have been used to build everything from highways to an international airport and a major deep-sea port. Understanding the inception of this policy is key to understanding its implications today. As we move forward in our exploration of China's debt trap policy, we'll see how this strategy has evolved over time and how it's impacting countries around the world. From its inception, China's debt trap policy has expanded exponentially. From a humble start, the policy has now grown to encompass a vast number of countries worldwide. This expansion was not a random occurrence, but a strategic move fueled by multiple factors. One of the prime drivers of this growth is China's objective to increase its geopolitical influence. By lending money to other nations, particularly those with struggling economies, China has been able to assert itself as a global powerhouse. This strategy is particularly evident in its dealings with countries along the Belt and Road Initiative, a development strategy involving infrastructure development and investments in nearly 70 countries. Another crucial factor behind this expansion is the lure of natural resources. Many of the nations ensnared in China's debt trap are rich in natural resources, which China needs to fuel its booming economy. By lending money to these countries, China secures access to these resources, often at a lower cost than if it were to purchase them on the open market. The number of countries involved in China's debt trap policy has also seen a significant increase. Initially, the policy primarily targeted countries in Africa and Asia. However, over time it has spread to include nations in Latin America, the Caribbean, and even Europe. This expansion indicates China's ambitious plans to extend its reach and influence globally. This growth, however, has not been without controversy. Many critics argue that China's debt trap policy is a form of neo-colonialism, exploiting poorer nations to further its own interests. These countries often find themselves unable to repay the loans, leading to a vicious cycle of debt and dependence. Despite these criticisms, there are no signs of China slowing down its debt trap policy. If anything, the policy seems to be expanding at an even faster pace, reaching out to more countries and offering larger loans. The expansion of this policy has led to significant global implications, which we will discuss next. So where does China's debt trap policy stand today? And what could it mean for the future? You may be wondering. Well, let's dive right into the current status and the potential implications. As of now, China's debt trap policy is very much in effect, with a growing list of countries involved. The latest entrant into this list is Argentina, grappling with a deepening debt trap and triple-digit inflation. The Argentinian peso has collapsed in value over the past decade, and its external debt is 45% of its GDP, or $277 billion. In response to this crisis, some propose adopting the US dollar as a solution. But what happens when a country fails to repay its debt? China has a rather unique approach to debt recovery. Instead of pressing for immediate repayment, China often renegotiates the terms or accepts payment in the form of resource extraction or infrastructure access. This method not only ensures a return on investment but also further deepens China's influence in the debtor country. Now let's gaze into the crystal ball and ponder the future implications. With an increasing number of countries entering China's debt trap, the policy's future seems robust. However, the potential backlash from debtor nations and the international community could pose challenges. Furthermore, the economic and political instability in debtor countries could also threaten China's return on investment. Emerging economies like China and India are seeking to detach from the US dollar's dominance. The shift in global economic power could further consolidate China's position as a lender, but the ripple effects on the global economy are yet to be seen. Another aspect to consider is how this policy might affect countries in the pipeline. With the looming threat of economic instability and the potential loss of sovereignty, these nations might be more cautious in accepting China's loans. As we can see, the future of this policy is uncertain, but its impact on the global economy is undeniable. The world watches with bated breath as the next chapter of China's debt trap policy unfolds. Now, let's turn our attention to how this policy affects India and the global economy. As we delve into the implications of China's debt trap diplomacy, it's crucial to understand that its effects are not limited to the debtor nations alone. This web of indebtedness has a ripple effect that reaches even countries like India and impacts the global economy at large. For India, the repercussions are multifaceted. Economically, there's a palpable fear of encirclement as China invests heavily in neighboring countries like Pakistan and Sri Lanka. This often leads to strategic imbalances and potential security threats. Moreover, India's trade deficit with China continues to widen, further complicating the equations. On a broader scale, the global economy too feels the tremors of China's debt trap policy. The case of Argentina is a telling example. As reported by Business Insider in July 2023, Argentina is on the brink of a deepening debt trap, with an external debt that's 45% of its GDP. The potential solution? Dollarization. Countries like Argentina, and even emerging economies like India, are looking for ways to detach from the dominance of the US dollar, a move that could destabilize the global financial system. Moreover, the debt trap policy also affects the global fight against climate change. As noted in Business Insider's Climate Action 30 list, leaders across the globe are working tirelessly on climate solutions. But when countries are burdened with insurmountable debt, their ability to invest in green technologies and sustainable practices is severely compromised. In essence, China's debt trap policy has far-reaching impacts. It's not just about economics, but also about power dynamics, geopolitical strategies, and environmental sustainability. It's a complex puzzle that the world is trying to decipher. The impact of China's policy reaches far beyond its borders, affecting economies around the world. As we have seen, China's debt trap policy is a complex and far-reaching issue. It's a strategic move that started decades ago, with China lending money to other countries, many of which are now ensnared in a web of debt. The list of these countries is long, and each one finds itself in a unique situation, grappling with the implications of their financial obligations to China. This policy didn't just happen overnight. It's been a gradual but purposeful expansion, with China strategically lending money to countries around the globe. The motives behind this policy are multifaceted, ranging from economic gain to geopolitical influence, and the impact has been far-reaching. As we look at the current status of these countries, it's clear that many are struggling under the weight of their debt. The future implications of this policy are still unfolding, but it's apparent that the repercussions will be significant and long-lasting. If these debts go unpaid, China has shown that it's willing to take drastic measures to recover what it's owed, which could have dire consequences for these nations. The effects of China's debt trap policy aren't limited to the countries in debt. This policy has a substantial impact on the global economy, creating ripples that reach far beyond China's borders. India, for instance, has felt the effects, and it's likely that other nations will too, as this policy continues to unfold. We've used international news articles to shed light on this issue, providing evidence of the far-reaching implications of this policy. From Argentina's deepening debt crisis to China's potential impact on the global climate crisis, it's clear that this policy is a global concern that warrants our attention. We hope this video has given you a deeper understanding of China's debt trap policy. What are your thoughts on this issue? Please share them in the comments section below.